Hello, test.
Good morning. It is August 30th. It's 9 a.m. We're here in the Commissioners Boardroom for the weekly meeting. We have a full slate of commissioners, administrator, and the clerk of the board. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, the first item on the agenda is the approval of August 16th and August 23rd Commissioner meeting minutes and special meeting minutes. Is there any corrections, revisions, or additions? Okay, with that, we'll move down to office business vouchers. Right here, Rocky.
Okay, there we go. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $987,666.06 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. And next, there's only one voucher.
Yes, only one voucher today.
So next, we move down to the approval of the consent agenda, which I believe there are 5 items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 5.
Second with quick discussion.
I would like to remove item 5 for separate discussion with separate vote. So there's been a motion and a second
Discussion is,
and discussion.
Just want to verify that my memory is correct, that item 4 is the one that we discussed previously with the auditor's office and concurred with them bringing it back for the consent. I believe it is. I just want to verify that. Yes, it is. Okay, thank you.
on number 5, the procurement of a 2022 Ford Explorer. I think we should address this with more discussion as far as putting in a vehicle in the motor pool for all departments to use. So I think if we're going to create a new policy, that we should just look at it at that time, and be my recommendation to table it at this time.
And this is why I asked for a separate discussion on it and a vote, so that we can get the first 4 items on the consent agenda passed, and then discuss this in further detail.
I'm not opposed to the separate discussion once we've completed action on the consent.
So we'll be voting on items 1 through 4 on the consent agenda, and then we'll go into further discussion and a vote on number 5.
And my understanding is 2 of the 3 commissioners would like to separate out item 5, so I'm okay with that. And yes, we'd vote on items 1 through 4.
So on items 1 through 4, we have a motion and a second for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Further discussion on item 5. Seeing that we don't have our travel put together yet.
Yeah, I just would, to add a little bit of
color commentary to it. The statutes allow the prosecuting attorney to elect whether to receive a stipend or a travel allowance or the use of a county vehicle.
Right.
And this is him exercising that choice to procure a county vehicle for his use. I see Kelly Shedler is here from the prosecuting attorney's office. She may wish to speak to it, but regardless of what we do with the vehicle policy that's been under consideration, I don't know that this would affect that that discussion. But you're certainly welcome to discuss those as a joint issue if you prefer to do that.
Yeah, we're so close to heading into budget that we've almost concluded this year. I don't know why we're in a rush to put this forth now. We can go through budget. We can do it at that time. There are other vehicle requests that I know that are going to come forth in the budget. And I just talked to the sheriff, and he's got SUVs out there that with 100,000 miles on them that I think we could really look into this carpool idea where multiple of our departments could utilize these vehicles and be a lot more efficient with the taxpayers' funds.
So the most efficient thing for the taxpayers' funds is probably to pay the monthly vehicle allowance to which the 3 commissioners and the county prosecutor are entitled by state statute. So a couple of observations. One, I don't know that this board even has the authority to deny the request because it is state law, and it is entitled in the state law. Second is that if you do the simple math and look at what it costs to buy a vehicle and then what it costs to set aside funds to amortize for that vehicle's replacement through ER&R, it is less costly to pay the monthly stipend, I think quite a lot. I can certainly understand why an elected official, having been dragged through the mud on this issue previously by this board, might want to simply take a county vehicle and avoid all that kind of future angst. So whether it's budget season or not, whether the sheriff has got vehicles that could go into a pool or not, my read of the statute is that the prosecutor's entitled to a dedicated vehicle. He has to respond potentially 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I don't know that we have an option other than to either approve the vehicle or approve the monthly allowance. And we could certainly look to council for a read on the statute. We could continue to pay the monthly stipend until we sort it out, or we can approve the vehicle. I think those are the options as I see it. And I don't see tabling it as a lawful option. It's an entitlement under statute, which supersedes our authority.
Well, there's been a lot stated there, and I guess if we don't have a say in it, I don't know why it'd be on front of the consent agenda for us to approve. Second is, Keith, I want this statute looked up. I want all 3 commissioners to have that statute. We keep getting quoted this law. I want to know what this law states. I want to read it myself. And he's been on the stipend for the whole year. They're dragged through the mud. I don't think he was dragged through the mud. He was questioned as to help writing the policy and having input on the policy, but claiming not to know about it is a question that didn't need to be answered. So if that's being dragged through the mud, that's all new to me. All I'm saying is we've got it on the agenda for the vehicle, our plan for the county. We haven't got that developed yet. We're going to have an onslaught of people asking for vehicles. I know they're going to want one for elections. I think that we should take our time here and look at what we already have for vehicles and a vehicle pool policy where people could utilize these vehicles.
Is it the chair's intention then that the prosecutor would continue to receive the monthly stipend until we
Yes.
sort this out?
Yes, he already is receiving it. It's
Well,
automatically deposited in all three of our accounts as we have elected to reduce ours from the 635 to 300. And he remained at the 635. He is still receiving that as far as I'm concerned. He's just not getting twice the amount every month.
So we can agree to disagree on the issue of being dragged through the mud. We'll just let the video record speak for itself. If anyone has a question, please go on the county website and look at the video, decide for yourself. And so long as the county is providing either a stipend or a vehicle, I think we're in compliance with the statute, so I'm fine with your suggestion.
Thank you. Commissioner Mullen?
I think
anything?
we should continue to pay the stipend until we can take a look at what our plans are for a motor pool and the pool vehicles.
Okay. So with that then, we'll move down to Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Participated in the WASAC call yesterday, which was a update from folks at the state that work on economic projections. The overall view of that was the Washington economy has been reasonably healthy, but there are some clouds on the horizon with the national picture on inflation, interest rates going up that may have some negative effect, more long-term. Obviously, the labor issues that both the private economy as well as public sector employers still face with a difficult hiring perspective. Also have some influence on the long-term economic projections for the region. Working on, kind of along that same line, some significant personnel issues with the HR director and the HAPO general manager leaving county employment. We have received some resumes that appear to be credible, and we will be interviewing some of those folks to bring a recommendation before the board at an upcoming meeting. We've got some ongoing labor contract issues, somewhat related to the transfer of knowledge with the HR director that I'm working on. I've also had a brief conversation with the owner of a building, the Atomic Foods building. He has expressed some level of interest in considering a sale to the county, so we will begin that discussion. There's a lot of kind of work that needs to be done to come up with estimated price and functionality of the current building versus possible future uses. So a lot of work still to be done there. As you mentioned, it's budget season. Began reviewing some agency budgets, had some conversations with the Juvenile Justice Center leadership, kind of what their needs are going to be for the next year, 2 years as we go through the remodeling of that facility. Also continuing work on the HAPO project. Had some very specific questions about the kitchen equipment that is currently in the facility and what our long-term plans are for that. So those conversations are continuing. That's most of what I've been working on the last few days.
Commissioner Peck.
This is a busy time of year for the Washington State Association of Counties, and especially for the Legislative Steering Committee, of which I'm one of 2 statewide co-chairs. We have, well, first off, I attended the update from WASAC yesterday that Mr. Johnson just spoke of, so I don't need to go into those details. Legislative Steering Committee is meeting as a whole on September 22nd in Ellensburg, and that'll be the meeting in which we set the agenda for the 39 counties going before the state legislature in this next session, January and February. So it's, of all the things we do at the state level with WASAC, it's one of the more impactful. There are close to 90 pages of proposed topics and agenda items for us to take to the legislature. I've got a meeting most of this afternoon in which we'll be trying to narrow that down to something more in the range of less than 10, given that it takes a tremendous amount of staff effort and cost to move the legislature on one major issue, let alone 10 or more. So that's consumed most of my time this week is prepping for that meeting this afternoon and then for the September 22nd meeting in Ellensburg. It is a WASAC-led steering committee meeting, but WASAC members are free to attend. That's it. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
So I went out and seen the Ben Franklin Transit providing the transportation to and from the fair. I just want to say that they did an outstanding job providing over and above service. They were handing out waters to the patrons, making sure everyone got boarded on the correct bus, and they were out there from open to close doing an outstanding job providing a service and giving the public an opportunity to see how convenient their services are. And I just want to say good job to them. I saw most of the executives from Ben Franklin Transit out there volunteering, including the new general manager for Ben Franklin Transit was out there as well at all hours of the day. Also been working on some boundaries for spraying practices in North County. We're in need of more clarity on the boundaries, including the road names. At this point, the boundary lines are on roads that simply do not exist or misrepresented in their naming because some of the roads just can't be found, and that determines where you can spray and where you can't, and what type of sprays are allowed in those areas. So been working on that, and that is my report for this week.
My report was Port of Pasco, which they had a meeting at Connell, and during the meeting it was very disruptive. They must have had an electric fencer that was by somewhere close proximity, because you heard a crack over the airwaves about every 2 seconds. So I put up with it for a while, but then I couldn't hardly understand what was being said, so I tuned out. I had several constituents calling me. One was up at Merrill's Corner. Truck traffic is really heavy, and they're using their Jake brakes in an excessive amount up there, and they've got some people that are complaining about the noise of the Jake brakes up there at Merrill's Corner there at the intersection of Glade and Eltopia West. And we're talking about 3 o'clock in the morning, excessive amount of Jake braking going on. So the other thing was the enforcement officer. I've had some people call me about down there behind Booker Auction. There's some bylaws put together there for that community, and they're being violated. Want to know if there's an enforcement officer that can come out and look at that. And then I had several people call me about dangers on the road. Again, the truck traffic is heavy. I guess there was one instance where a truck passed another truck, some up north Franklin County, almost caused an accident. We've seen a couple really bad accidents. I witnessed a car that passed me, and I was going 60 mile an hour on a 55, and we're barely able to get back into place before a truck went the other direction. So it's getting rather interesting out there on the roads in North Franklin County. So just encouraging everybody to be careful, use caution, because we have witnessed some really bad wrecks already, and it is a dangerous time with all the traffic of the heavy trucks going up and down the road. So with that, we'll move into public comment. Is there anybody in the room for public comment or on the phone, Keith?
I do have one on the phone.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take it first.
Good morning. Caller, you are on the line for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Commissioners. After viewing your August 23rd meeting concerning county vehicle policy, I specifically want to address comments made by the assessor referencing his view that current policy is restrictive in a lot of ways. He said that he wants the ability to not have to come and ask permission. He stated he has access to vehicles throughout his department, and not every department has, and he would like the freedom and ability to make these decisions, even loaning to other departments without having to ask permission. He stated, I believe condescendingly, laughing, that he has, quote, not had to ask mommy and daddy for the keys since 1971. I do not think using taxpayer-funded vehicles at all compares to personal use within a family unit. He stated several times for commissioners' public clarity and openness that there may be a time when we find we've used the county vehicle for personal use, running over to dinner, driving places, maybe at a conference. He states his own personal vehicle broke down 3 times in 2 months, and he had nothing else to drive. He states he used a county vehicle to get back and forth to the office, and he reiterates several times that he, quote, checked with them, I believe the auditor, on reimbursement rate and cut a check ahead of time. How is it possible to calculate mileage for an unknown period of time before it happens? He stated he, quote, doesn't want this to become a habit. I was just stuck and needed to still work for the county and do a job. Just being straight up. Well, what about the department secretary or any other employee that gets stuck without a personal vehicle for a few days or weeks? Would they be entitled under current policy to the same privilege taken by the assessor? And being stuck with no vehicle for 3 times in 2 months, it would be hard to imagine one would need to travel only to and from work. Why couldn't an employee earning nearly $100,000 a year be able to rent a car or use an Uber like other employees are expected to do? It seems clear the only benefit was for personal financial benefit, not for county benefit. He acknowledges he knows only 4 elected officials have the authority to have a county vehicle assigned to them or a stipend, the 3 commissioners and the PA. It seems clear that he already knowingly violated county policy and is now asking for the ability to manage vehicles assigned to him without having to answer to the commission. What this employee did is a good example of why central policy control is necessary, and the commission should establish and monitor these policies. Adherence to the policies is the only mechanism to assure the taxpayer's interest is protected, as uncomfortable as that may be for some individuals. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Not here to refute or comment on the previous caller. I did say what I said at the last meeting for clarity and openness so that the public does know what's going on. And yes, I do not believe in reporting to mommy and daddy every time you turn around as an elected official to do something. But boy, there's been a lot of accusations about toxic environment in this county and in the offices. And to be honest with you, yesterday morning, my staff was a little upset about the comments that have just blatantly been thrown out against this county, because they said they don't believe that they have a toxic environment. They haven't seen toxicity, haven't seen the impact from it. So I'm kind of here to say, you know, we don't have that happening down in our office. We actually have a fantastic staff. They work great together, and the relationships that we've had with other offices have been very good, up to and including loaning them a vehicle when they needed it for county business. But I got a letter that just came in early this morning. Last week, we did a training session in our department, and another county had requested to be able to come in and learn how we were doing certain things, because we've changed policies and procedures to become more efficient, much better in our county. And they traveled many, many hours to get here, sent 3 people, paid for them. We didn't pay for them. They paid for their own county employees to stay overnight in a motel, food, and so forth. But we put on some training for them along with our new staff. And this is a letter that I got from them. It says, I just wanted to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for all of your gracious hospitality and kindness. Truly, that was the most intense and valuable education experience that I have had in 25 plus years of appraising. this is specific to Nikki. Nikki, you are my role model for what a chief appraiser should and can be. They go on to say the three of us independently and collectively mulled over our time at Pasco and met Monday for about 5 hours and hammered out the plan to implement all of your suggestions immediately, hoping that we would fully, on the March 31 schedule of 2024, shooting for May 31 of 2023, and it has to do with state statutory requirements that we're now meeting in this county. We presented it to, and they listed the name of their assessor, in the afternoon. And he wholeheartedly accepted the plan in its entirety with no revisions. He even volunteered to head up trying to locate survey support, parcels, GIS information. Then they said, needless to say, the three of us have gone from feeling hopeless to being completely excited about being able to get our ship sailing like yours, our very own Pasco plan. Now this is from another major county, not a small one, a county actually larger than we are. We've assisted 2 other counties with problems that they've had in the last year, trying to get things going. And I just thought that Nikki, the appraisal staff, and the assessor staff deserved open public kudos for all that they're doing. So, thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, and thank you for helping out other counties. Is there anybody else for public comment?
I just would like to just agree with the Assessor John Rosenell that we do not work in a toxic environment. My office does a really good job. We do well for the public, and our staff gets along really well. And we do have other counties that call and ask us to do things for them. And we're here to help other departments to succeed and do what they can to do as the revenues come in. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I just gotta be frank, I don't know where this toxic came from, this whole notion that we're toxic in the county. I don't know where it's coming from. Go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's been unfortunate to see this accusation of toxicity play out.
Could you please just enlighten me where you've seen this at?
So somebody somehow leaked some letters from the recently resigned HR director to the Tri-City Herald.
Oh,
And
I don't get
so-
the Tri-City Herald, so I guess that's why.
So it's been playing out in the Tri-City Herald with comments, 610 KONA, it was on there, and it's unfortunate. So as a businessman here in Franklin County, I have the opportunity to work with a lot of the offices here inside this courthouse, from Josie's to John's, and I'm thankful for the opportunity that I get to work with those offices. Since John has taken the role as the assessor there, it's been a pleasure. They've been very helpful. I've had people reach out to me that didn't know how, and on a very short notice, the assessor and his deputy and other staff have offered to sit down with myself and the others that reached out for me for help, and has been it's been refreshing, quite frankly, to have a public office that's willing to sit down and work for their constituents the way that our assessor's office has. I can say that as well for our sheriff's department. They have worked diligently when I've had a concern of recent. I've come and spoke to you before of my experience with Josie's office, and how that whether it's Josie is in the office or not, no matter her staff, they work diligently and faithfully to try to the best way that I can describe it is hold my hand through the process. I've been through it numerous times, whether it's parcel segregation or whatever it is, because it's what they do daily. They work very diligently to walk you through the process, and I've had many people tell me that they've experienced the same thing. So this accusation of toxicity is concerning, and so as I thought about it, quite a bit over the weekend actually, I just got back from vacation with my family. I thought about it on vacation as I sat quietly and had a cup of coffee by myself. I wonder if it's because there's accountability that is coming to this county, is why some of these people are feeling the pressure of accountability. And so their only answer is to say that it's toxicity, because they don't like accountability. I like accountability. I'm thankful that we have accountability here, and encourage you to continue to provide accountability. Continue to be open and transparent with the process, and continue to answer the questions of the constituency, whether it's comfortable or not. So that's what I had to say this morning. Didn't intend to say this, but feel that it's necessary that when there's accusations thrown out there from resigned department heads, that you know the truth from the citizens and the people, the businesses that work with the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
So I can tell you how the letters got spread around. So there's an individual by the name of Chris Turner that's running for sheriff against me, and he made public disclosure requests to the HR, which they released, I think, last week. They went to Mr. Turner. No, they were released last week. And then they took those letters, which you can read all over the internet, Facebook, et cetera, and started posting them, making accusations, primarily by a Pauline Turner of Connell that's spreading it and pushing it around, and then they sent those articles to the media and other places to spin everything up. Mr. Bauman hit it on the head. When you hold people accountable for their actions, then all they can do is sling mud or point fingers in order to create that. So if you go to what's happening in Connell, Pauline Turner's Facebook website, The Herald, doesn't take much for you to figure out what's going on and how it got started.
Is there anybody else for public comment?
Kathy Sant, Franklin County. I am just here to speak for the car allowance and for the work vehicle. It is not because mud was slung, which in my opinion it was. He was accused of things that were out of his control. That was a mistake by another office that was made for the overpayment. But also to have a county car, my husband responds to calls 24/7. He goes to homicides, whether it's on a highway, far reaches of the county. He's there with police officers from the sheriff's department. It happens last 3 Mother's Days, he was called. Middle of the night, 3 a.m., he gets called. When he is on the highway without any lights, if he would have a county vehicle, it would be a lot safer. He would have lights on his vehicle that would keep him safe, so the county would not be liable for any injuries or accidents that are caused to him. And as a wife, I am really concerned that he goes in his own personal vehicle to these calls. And I know he gets a stipend for the car every month, and which I feel is warranted as much as he goes out on weekends, nights, everything else. I don't know any other elected official who has to get called in the middle of the night, maybe the sheriff or people from his office. But he gets called constantly. I get woken up 3 a.m., 2 a.m., 5 a.m. to these different homicides that he takes part in. So that is just my concern, and I want to make a record of it. He's currently serving our country in the Army for 6 weeks. He's halfway through, and he's not here to make these for himself. And as a concerned wife, I just want to put it on the record. And also for the taxpayer money, it's amazing to me how taxpayer money is not a concern when it's people that the commissioners like to get vehicles or new employees or whatever. But in his office, it seems to be a problem, and that's when the taxpayer money has to be saved. Thank you.
Is there anybody else for public comment?
I'll throw just a couple of statements in on the vehicle for that Sean has requested. and proper lighting. Whether it be a carpool vehicle or whatever, I think the lighting is absolutely necessary when you're called out. We've actually started adding lighting on the assessor's cars because we're parked alongside roadways and things. I'm trying to keep it where the county is not as liable. They'd be more seen and less apt to have some type of an accident with some emergency type warning lights on there. I did read the request, and I will tell you this. Those vehicles were not available when we were putting in a request for the assessor's office for our final vehicle. We couldn't even get one of those like that. We ended up having to go around and get bids from all over to get it because they weren't available. The bid price that he got, guys, is really good. He got a really good bid price on that. To be honest with you, I wished we could have got that good, but there were no vehicles available then, and we'd have been waiting to clear into next year, and I think it's a 2023 if they order it now. And I'm not saying give it to him, don't give it to him. I'm just telling you, it's probably 7 months out before they can even get their hands on it. We're still waiting for our last vehicle. It's been 7 months now, and we may be another couple of months. So just keep that in mind as far as order time, and if you go too long, they won't be available until the next year's models come out, which puts you 8 months further down the road. So I'm not taking sides either way. I'm just trying to lay out some information, having gone through this process numerous times in the last year.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Okay, with that, nobody else on the phone, Keith?
No.
Okay, with that, we'll move down to the closed record hearing, CUP 2022-03, roof height deviation, Pheasant Run Lot 6. And at this time, I'll open the closed record hearing. Derek, please.
Thank you, Chair. As stated, this is a conditional use permit for a roof height deviation request on an accessory structure. Property is located south of Pheasant Run, east of Quail Bluff Lane, north of Quail Run Road, and west of Dent Road. As mentioned, it allows construction use of a proposed accessory structure in that accessory building that would exceed the maximum allowed building height in the RS40 zone. 3,500 square foot for the proposed structure, and the property is 1.16 acres. Address is 11812 Pheasant Run Road, Pasco. Parcel number 126150233. The zoning's RS40 with a comp plan of low density residential. It is and that's a City of Pasco designation because it's in the UGA. That's the proposed site. This is a site plan. That's the proposed location. Shots of the property. Whoops. Delete there. On or about May 26th, staff sent notices to technical agencies, property owners within 500 feet, and Franklin County Graphic. We also posted the property with a pending land use action sign and submitted the SEPA to the registry as number 202-202-638. We received 4 comments from 3 households in opposition to the proposed accessory structure. Comments received mention the structure is in violation of the neighborhood code and its conditions and restrictions. However, Franklin County, as an agency, does not enforce CCNRs. Those are agreements between basically people living in that neighborhood. When you move into a neighborhood, when you buy property, if there's codes, covenants, and restrictions, you're to be notified of that at the time of purchase, and you're agreeing to those terms. However, they're a civil matter. It's basically a contract between landowners is one way to look at it. And those are enforced by the courts, basically. The HOA, it's part of the purpose of most HOAs is to bring enforcement actions for violations of CCNRs. The county We do review CCNRs on, like a new subdivision or things like that, but that's to ensure that there's no CCNR language that would violate state or local law, such as racial, these were common back in the day, where you would have like limitations on who could live there or things like that. We don't see that, but we still review them to make sure also that maintenance and things like that are being addressed if it's a private road system or water systems or things like that, but we do not enforce them. So the request is to exceed the accessory structure roof height of 18 foot as measured from the midpoint of the roof. In this application, they're seeking a 20-foot midpoint with an overall peak roof height of approximately 23 feet. We received comments, technical comments from Franklin County Public Works, Colville Confederated Tribes, and the Health District. The Planning Commission recommended findings of fact is that the structure in the RS-40 is in accordance with the goals, policies. All properties are generally allowed an accessory dwelling unit, accessory structure, not a dwelling unit. That's a different matter. It will not adversely affect public infrastructure. It'll be constructed, maintained, and operated to be in harmony with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity, and the location, height, infrastructure will not discourage the development of permitted uses on property in the general vicinity. It's a garage, storage building. It's very similar to other uses in the area, and there's no reason to suspect that it would endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare. The building, they'll have to go through the full building permit process, and they will have to meet what we call the fire code setbacks, which are expanded setbacks because there's no fire hydrant within 500 feet. The structure will be made compatible with the, due to it being over 1,680 square feet. They'll have to have matching roofing and siding material. So if it's a stucco house with a tin roof, then this building will be a stucco building with a tin roof. And they need to be color matched. There was an outstanding issue associated with a pool they put in. They've never gotten the final on that. And it had to do with the gate access onto the property. And with pools, you're required to have fencing and gating to protect, to limit access to the pool. We're letting that wait until they bring in because they're going to use that as the access to have them install a bunch of stuff that you're just going to have to take down in order to rebuild it. So they'll have to have that final inspection. They'll have to have all that gate and everything in place before they'll get the certificate of occupancy, but we're allowing basically for them to work on both simultaneously. And then they'll need to follow an inadvertent discovery plan. We don't normally get comments from the tribes on this type of structure. It was a little odd, but frankly, that's a standard anytime, no matter what you're doing. If you happen to come across archaeological relevant stuff, that you're supposed to follow it inadvertent, whether we tell you to or whether or not you're just digging in your backyard. That's state law. So that's pretty standard. It's just unusual that they even commented on this project. And this is our suggested motion. More than happy to answer any questions.
Questions, commissioners?
Derek, which tribe responded?
The Colvilles.
Okay, well, I appreciate the fact that they're reading these and providing comment that's useful for everybody. Reading from the agenda summary report, page 1, conditional use description. Middle of the first paragraph says roof height of the proposed structure is 23 feet. I'd ask a favor. Is it when you're using the roof heights, nominally, we use the midpoint of the roof.
Correct.
That's what the 18-foot code requirement is. In this case, they're asking for 20 feet, which is the midpoint of the roof. But in this particular one, it says roof height of the proposed structure is 23 feet. So I took that to mean the midpoint, but I now understand that it's the peak.
that-
And it's an important difference because it's 2 feet over code versus 5 feet over. So the request is, you've gotten, some of us, at least me, trained to use midpoint. So if you're not going to use midpoint, please just throw in a word there that it's peak. And I'm going through this just because others may have had the same question. Second thing, there was a note in there that has been another CUP approved 0.13 miles away. And just a sort of a friendly caution that we look at these CUPs on an individual basis, and it's really important that we do because circumstances, soils, sight lines, access, so many things can affect it. And when I saw that there's another one in there, 0.13 away, I thought, you know, that kind of puts the thumb on the scale for approval. And I don't think that that's appropriate because you just don't know that they're actually apples and apples. And each one of these deserves to be measured on its own individual merits. The reference to CCNRs, I understand that is a civil contract between developers and neighbors. And I think you, by and large, got that right, that we probably don't weigh into that. But then you started talking about how we review the CCNRs to make sure that they don't conflict in any way with county or state rules, ordinances, laws. I'm taking it that because this development has gone forward, you did that review and there's nothing in those CCNRs that conflict with state and county?
I would presume this development was before my time.
Okay, fair enough. And we don't want to go any farther because that might take us outside the record here, so appreciate that. Lastly, we do conditional use permits. Let me actually start this a little differently. You and I have had discussions generally about how the code is written to satisfy the majority of cases so that people can look at the code and say, yep, looks like what I want to do fits.
Correct.
It doesn't mean that if something in that code that we're talking about doesn't mean that something outside of that can't be done. It just means it has to be considered on individual case by case, conditional use permit.
And openly.
And I understand that both you and your staff and the planning commission all look at these, and your staff makes a recommendation to the planning commission reviews it, they make a recommendation to us.
Correct.
So my question is, and sorry for the long preamble, but I wanted to set the premise. What are you looking for when you do your office review? Or in this case, let's keep it on this record. When you did the review for this one and you forwarded it to the planning commission, what things did you look at and how do you weigh those?
So what we do in my office is we look at the application and the law in place at the time the application was submitted. And then in these okay, so that's a prescriptive, which are the things that are directly covered, permitted by right, whatnot. And we just, if it meets it, we move forward. With the conditional use permits, we again look to see if it's a listed conditional use in the code. If it's a listed conditional use within the specific zoning, then we go through the conditional use permit process. And we're looking primarily at that point as far as staff goes for any risks to the health and safety primarily or liability for the county. The legal, like, is this going to create a situation that endangers or diminishes, like blocks of view line maybe, or things like that is what we're looking at.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's good. You sent out notices to property owners within 500 feet?
Correct. It's within
Is that part of county policy and practice and procedure?
Yeah, within the UGA or in the,
Okay, well, you've already
Yeah.
acknowledged that
and then a mile outside.
that's part of the
those
process.
areas. Yeah.
So why do we do that?
To notify the neighbors, to,
Give them an opportunity to comment for, against, neutral, whatever they want to say.
Exactly. Or, you know, we're not perfect. Maybe we didn't see something. Maybe we don't know something
Sure.
that they know,
Yeah.
so.
And so when you get that input, that feedback, what do you do with that?
If it's a matter of law, material, comment, then
Mm-hmm.
we'll go in and we may adjust our recommendations based on those material comments. If they're speculative or things like that, that's not really our purview. But we take those comments in verbatim, and that's why they need to be either in person or in writing. We don't regurgitate comments.
Okay. Do those comments in any way influence your department's recommendation to the planning commission?
If they're a material comment, yeah, but not if they're speculative.
Okay. So if you got 100 comments saying no or 100 comments saying yes, unless they were material to a violation of some sort of code or county law or state law or something, unless they're material, you would disregard those in the recommendation?
Yes, because we're, just like I said, if it's speculative, I can't, you know, there's different things.
Well, sure.
Subjective
Yeah.
value. We try to keep our subjectivity out of it and just report the facts.
Okay. So in this case, you got 4 comments from 3 households in opposition,
Correct.
and none of those were of a material nature based
They-
on your review?
They regarded violations of CCR not of county or state law.
Okay, all right. So the practice is you don't weigh that public input unless it's a material breach that's relevant. Okay, no, you said that, thanks. That's helpful because I've been doing this a while, and we've never had this conversation before, and I think it's useful maybe for a lot of people to hear that. And when citizens, let's stick to this record, when these citizens submitted their concerns, I have no way to know if they really understood what those concerns are and how they need to be focused. Yeah, and so, yeah, I think I'll leave it there. That was very helpful. Thank you for walking through that with me.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mullen?
I have no questions other than it was approved by the County Planning Commission, correct?
It was recommended for approval, correct?
It says it's Pheasant Run Lot 6. How many lots are in the Pheasant Run?
Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly, but I'd say around 30. It kind of goes, it's
Okay.
kind of a windy road.
Is this got a view of the river? Is that why the 4 other residents are concerned?
Not that I'm aware of. It's pretty far off the river.
Okay. And is he located in the back?
Let me-
Can you go back to the map and we can
Yeah,
look at it? Because if he's in the back, he's not going to obstruct any view. I don't see any problem.
So there's kind of the setup. You can kind of see, you know, it's not real close to water. So,
Is north up on this map as normally we'd
Correct.
expect?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so this is part of the Pheasant Run subdivision.
So are the outer ones, correct? So he's not in the
Yeah,
back?
all of this,
Yep.
and then over here, there's a couple subdivisions between here, and they're relatively long and thin, but he's quite a few.
Derek, aren't those diagonal lots on the left side of the map, aren't those the ones on the bluff? Am I reading that wrong?
I don't know off the top of my head which one specific, this might be Spencer's. I mean, these are
Okay.
up north. I want to say they're east of Kohler. Or you go up Kohler and you take a right into Eagle Crest. So that's kind of where you're at. So there's most likely intervening, I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I don't know
I'm
exactly, but
I'm
they're not,
looking
they're
at a
not
different,
shoreline properties. They're not shoreline, they're not tertiary, or even, they're,
Yeah, well, the house on the left center of the map, the one that's shaped like a boomerang with a dark roof, that is
that one.
the last house going west before the bluff. So there are no
Yeah.
houses between that one and the bottom of the hill to the west of it. Even though you have
That's that, yeah, there's this
the-
ravine here. That's the one you're talking about?
the left-hand edge of the image is essentially where the hill drops off steeply.
Yeah, there's houses here, and
Well,
then there's,
yeah, I'm looking at aerial image of the same thing, and
okay,
there's a house,
because that's what these are. These are.
yeah, those are
residential
lots, but those are lots down in the lower part of the hillside. And to the east of the applicant's house, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 that line up visually with that garage.
Yeah, the approximate placement was right there.
Okay.
There's,
If you go back to the map we're just looking at, please.
so. the
So if you
placement-
draw a line from the site of the garage straight to the right, due east, it lines up with all those other properties.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I will close the closed record hearing, Cup 2022-03, and entertain a motion.
Move for approval of motion or ASR 2022-206 is presented.
That would be CUP 2022-03.
Thank you.
I apologize. Here's a suggested motion.
There's the suggested motion. Commissioner Mullen.
Move that Franklin County Board of County Commissioners adopt the 6 findings of fact and 9 conditions of approval as provided for the resolution and approved case file CUP 2022-03 as presented.
Second with discussion.
There's been a motion and a second for the approval of Cup 2022-03 with discussion.
So one of the many reasons that we have ordinances and codes for development is to ensure consistency, harmony, peace and safety, a lot of the things that Derek spoke to. And I'm always a little concerned when I see a proposal that looks like it is going to impact surrounding properties. And then we get into this process of trying to assess just how much impact is it likely to have, and what does that say in terms of allowing people the lawful enjoyment of their property, which is something that I've used that phrase for years because it's important. In this case, it's unique. It's the first time I can recall that we had one where there are CC&Rs that have been raised that suggest that the CC&Rs would not allow this development. I appreciate the fact that you clarified for the record that it's not the purview of the county to weigh in on CC&Rs. I think it's a little unclear as to whether or not it's ethical or lawful for us to weigh that in to our deliberations. And lastly, I'll say I'm regardless of which way the board votes, if it should be approved, it's of some comfort to know that the neighbors who expressed opposition would likely still have the CC&R opportunity and have that discussion. So this may not be the final chapter, but final note, in terms of the view from the most likely affected properties directly east, those 3 or 4 that are lined up, it's kind of hard for me to contemplate that a mid-roof height of 18 feet versus 20 doesn't seem like it's going to change a whole lot. I mean, it will affect it somewhat, but if you can't see over the 20-foot, I doubt you could see over the 18 as well, if you follow me. So don't want to be insensitive to those neighbors' concerns, and so I'll leave it there. Thanks.
All right, we got a motion and a second for the approval of CUP 2022-03. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All righty. Next on the agenda is a closed record hearing, CUP 2022-05, wireless communications tower, and it's presented again by Mr. Bratton. So please continue, Derek.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah,
And at this time, I'll open
yep.
the closed record hearing.
Sorry. This is for a 195-foot cell tower out in the AP 40 zones, southeast of Black Road, west of Wadsworth Road, and northeast of State Route 260. As mentioned, it's a wireless communication facilities or cell tower to include a new 195-foot lattice tower that will support up to 4 cell phone carriers. The footprint on the property is approximately 8,100 square foot, and that's the fenced area that's got the cell tower, and then the support equipment is all within that 8,100 square foot footprint. And they're proposing at this point 195-foot tower, security fencing, and an emergency backup diesel generator. Property is not addressed at this time. There's no structures out there. That's usually what triggers addressing or an access. Parcel number is 103-350-027. The zoning's AP 40, comp plan agricultural, and the entire property size net is 318 acres. So it's out there in the middle of a whole lot of nothing. And it's all rangeland as far as I know. I don't know much else out there. Lots of the ravines and valleys. This is a proposed site plan showing. The orientation on this is a little weird, but that's the proposed area. That's the overall parcel. I mean, it's pretty nominal on the property. On June 30th, 2022, staff sent notices to technical agencies, property owners within 1 mile in this case. Franklin County Graphic posted the land with a pending land use action sign and submitted it to the CEPA registry as 202-203-275. The proposed use in the AP 40 zoning is in accordance with the goals, policies. So when it comes to wireless communications, there's kind of a process of a review that occurs. So first, when you want to, if you're a cell carrier or a wireless provider, you have to see if you can co-locate. So first you got to look at what are existing towers in this area that you're trying to cover. You also need, you don't generally do it unless you're going to upgrade or you're trying to do a gap coverage. You're trying to cover an area. So they went through this process. In your packets, you were provided an analysis that showed they went through this process of, based on the gaps they're trying to cover and the needs, there just wasn't another structure available. If they can co-locate, they will generally try to do so. It's just a lot more cost effective. You don't have to build a tower. If you do build a tower, you're required to also allow for other carriers to use that. Now, that's a contractual arrangement between the tower owner and the other provider, but you have to negotiate in good faith with them and allow them. And my experience, I'm not aware of anybody that ever really being an issue. But in this case, they did their analysis. They showed the need for the new tower. When that occurs, then we proceed with the conditional use permit. If they're just modifying or adding equipment to an existing, that's just an administrative action done through the building department. But for the siting of a new one, we require this conditional use permit. So that's kind of where we're at with this and why this is a conditional use before the board. and that why they're building a tower as opposed to just seeking to co-locate on another structure. The proposal will be constructed, maintained, operated, be in harmony. It's a tower. We received no comments regarding this from the public, and very limited comments from agencies. Location and the height of the structure will not discourage the development, permitted uses on property in the general vicinity. Like I said, it's primarily rangeland or just open space. Operation will not be more objectionable. It just stands there. I mean, we've all seen cell towers, so. And it will not endanger the public health and safety. Again, if you're in a high-density area and you're building towers, you start getting into things like collapse radius and various other elements, but in this case, there's nothing around. If it falls over, it probably isn't going to land on anything. Can never say never, but, you know. So they'll have to, at all times, comply with the standards established in Franklin County Zone, or 1766-100, which is our WCF chapter or section. And primarily, they're going to have to design it and build it and do various meet various agencies, including the FAA, the FCC. Those are the primary licensing individuals. The FAA to make sure that the height is okay, not interfering with airspace, whether and what type of particular lighting they have to have, whether it's flashy, solid, yellow, red, all of that stuff. That's handled by them. And then, of course, they'll need to make sure that it meets the requirements of the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, with regard to signal interference and things like that. They'll also have to submit a statement signed by the applicant and landowner agreeing to negotiate in good faith to facilitate co-location of additional communication providers on the tower, and that if the tower ever becomes decommissioned, that they have to remove it within 90 days. Not decommissioned, I'm sorry. They stop using it. It has to be decommissioned within 90 days and removed. They'll have to put this fence around it, and it must be a minimum of 6 foot in height. Exterior lighting needs to be directed down if they have any, as far as like security lighting and things like that, so that it stays and it shines on the property, not across it's off the property basically. The light halo should not extend beyond the property line of the 8,100 feet. If the property is later adjusted through the addition of equipment, boundary line adjustment, or short plat to where it would affect the project site footprint, a new conditional use permit may be required. It depends. I mean, if it's a little tweak, we can probably go through a more administrative process. But generally, if they're expanding, what they're being approved for is the 8,100 square foot and the tower. Anything beyond that could trigger another conditional use permit. And that's a suggested motion, and more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
So do they put an access road into this,
Yes,
and they put an apron?
they will,
The
yes.
entrance onto
Yeah,
the
they'll,
highway.
they'll need an approach permit.
All right. That's it, thank you.
The road in is part of the square footage you spoke to, or no?
No, it's not.
Okay. And is there an existing road? Is there any, does that play into the board's decision anyway?
Well, they'll have to put, I mean, you can decide based on whatever you desire to decide on, but.
Well, no, actually, we can't. We have to
Well,
stay,
yeah.
we have to stay within the record. So what I'm really asking is, has a provision been made in the record for access to the site? Obviously, the approach permit on any county road is the standard, and that's in there. I'm just curious if, by chance, maybe we've,
The specific alignment, where is that? It's in their spec docs of where that's coming in. It's coming in from the north, if I recall correctly, off of Black Road.
Is it fair to say that that's not really the county's concern? If we grant a CUP here, they've still got to make arrangements to get the road to it?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, all right. I kind of thought, but didn't know. You got a requirement in there in the record somewhere to dress it up like bitter brush juniper trees so nobody will see it?
No.
You know, you travel around the country and you see palm trees, there's the,
Pine trees. We
yeah,
got one
there's
of
the
those in
Pasco National
Spokane.
Forest at 68 in Court. Okay, that obviously was in jest. You mentioned, and I appreciate this, about applicants' requirements to coordinate with FAA, FCC, and other regulating agencies. I'm just curious, in your June 30 notice to technical agencies, do we send a notice to the FAA and the FCC? How do they know that this is even happening?
Yes, we
So-
notified them.
So we
and
notified them in that June 30
I
tech
even
notice?
think we did the Navy as well because of the military overflight operations.
Well, it's excellent anticipation on your part, because there are some low-level training routes. In fact, I saw a C-17 fly through there the other day when I was flying over them. So if you included the Navy, that's excellent. Let's see. You've answered a lot of my questions. Let me just run through here. Just by chance, you don't know what the elevation of the site is, do you?
I don't, but it's in here. I
Okay.
just don't remember it.
No,
off the top
it's
of my
fine.
head.
I was just
Yeah.
curious that as you go north in the county, of course, the elevation comes up, and at 195 feet, that's an area that is sometimes used for flight training, and
Yeah.
so, okay. And you made a reference, you said that the applicants are required to allow other carriers to share the tower. Is there anything in the record about the county maybe looking at it for law enforcement communications or other possible uses?
It's not in the record, but that's a carrier.
And that would be an option? Okay, thank you.
Could it possibly be used by ham radio operators too, if they're a carrier too, and they're licensed? Would that be a possibility?
That would be between them, and I've never heard of that, but I've never heard that that's prohibited. And that would be a matter between, again, the proposed user and the owner of the tower,
Okay,
which is AT&T in this case, I believe.
it is AT&T.
Yeah. Smart Link is the contractor.
Sure. Move for approval of resolution
Excuse me.
2022-207.
Excuse me, Commissioner Peck, I want to close the closed record hearing and entertain a motion. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you were correct, thank you. Move for approval of resolution 2022-207 in the matter of conditional use permit 2022-05 wireless communications tower.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second for the approval of resolution 2022-207, CUP hearing 2022-05. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move down to the administration office business. Mr. Johnson?
Yes, thank you. I want to bring an item forward for discussion. We would anticipate, if the board is in favor of this proposal, that we would bring a formal presentation and contract forward. But the auditor's office has been recruiting for an accounting supervisor position for a couple of months and has not received qualified resumes for that position. And they are asking for us to consider using a search firm, Prothman, which the county has used before, to engage them for a professional recruitment process to help identify candidates that may be from outside of the area. That would include some recruiting and advertising costs that are beyond the internal resources of the auditor's office. They're probably looking at a $10,000 to $15,000 recruitment process when that professional fee is paid, as well as advertising and any direct mail expenses. The county has in the past, as I said, used Prothman for this type of service. We have included consideration of some kind of retention or relocation assistance benefits to some other positions, and so they are asking for us to consider approving this contract with Prothman, and it would probably require a transfer from our contingency fund to the auditor's office to allow them to incur this kind of cost for recruiting for this key position in the auditor's office. You are probably aware that the budget manager, Tom Westerman, is retiring and leaving at the end of the month. Tim Anderson is the current accounting supervisor, and so they're recruiting for a replacement of that position.
So Tom will be leaving at the end of the month. Tim
End
will,
of September, I'm sorry.
end of
next
September.
month, yeah.
So, and then Tim will step into Tom's position.
Correct.
And we're recruiting for Tim's position.
That's correct.
And they haven't got any applicants.
They've said they've only received, I think, one resume.
And we've been successful in the past using this,
We haven't used Prothman a lot, but we have used them,
and we were successful when we did use them.
yeah.
Keith, have we ever used, well, refresh my memory on when we used it for anything other than your position?
I'm not aware that we have used it for another
Yeah,
position.
I don't believe we've ever used it for anything less than an executive level county administrator seat.
That's not to say that Prothman doesn't do this kind of work. They do it for several levels of, but yes,
Yeah,
you're correct.
I've looked at their listings a few times, and I don't recall seeing anything at this level. I'm sure they would if we paid them to do it. I'd be interested in your thoughts as to whether or not this establishes some sort of a precedent for other departments and the cumulative costs that that could bring.
I think this is a bit of a one-off. We know that it's been very difficult to attract professional level employees in a number of different areas. We're not currently recruiting for an engineer, but that's tough to fill those kinds of positions. Both the prosecuting attorney's office and the Office of Public Defense are having an extremely difficult time recruiting qualified attorneys for the work that they're doing. Accountants are in that same class of professional level candidates that it requires a little more effort. I don't know whether this creates any kind of a precedent. Certainly each one would be subject to consideration by this board, and you can make that decision of whether you think any one request is something that meets those qualifications.
Does the position require a CPA?
It requires an accounting degree. I don't believe it requires a CPA certification.
So it's a bachelor's degree position, and it's not the number one accounting position.
Correct.
How long have they been looking?
Oh, at least a couple of months. I don't know the exact date of when they started recruiting, but
And how many applicants have they received?
one.
And how long have we known that Mr. Westerman was retiring?
I believe
That was
have to
announced
check.
earlier this year, if
Yeah,
I remember.
earlier this year.
Well, I understand the desire for him to get some help in finding somebody, but I think the same or greater need exists in several other departments, and unless we're prepared to pony up 10 to 15,000 for each of them, and I can envision right off the top of my head probably 6 or 8 positions, and at that rate, you're looking at $100,000 of taxpayer money. Had they started advertising and looking back when Mr. Westerman announced his retirement, we'd be 6 or 8 months in, and if they still didn't have anybody, then my thinking might be different. But it's been 60 days. Seems premature to spend that much money.
My personal thoughts are that it would be frivolous to advertise that early if you didn't have a spot available to hire that person, because then you would ask them to be on hold for that long. But I still think that it's premature to spend this kind of money. I think that all of us know people that are accountants, and we could probably find somebody here locally.
I will certainly clarify that question about how long they've been recruiting and what they've done in that regard.
Okay. But I am too not inclined to spend that kind of money right now in a search.
Have they contacted the universities looking for recent graduates?
Yeah, they've gone through a number of traditional recruiting functions. Recent graduates are not likely to have the qualifications. This is going to require a specialized skill with public sector accounting. It's different than private accounting. Fund accounting is just fundamentally different, and so it would require somebody, for example, that had maybe worked in the state auditor's office or another municipality, had a pretty good understanding of how the chart of accounts works in a public sector setting.
Have they reached out to workforce development?
I don't know that they've reached out to workforce specifically, but I'll identify the specific.
They might want
place
to,
that they have.
because, yeah, they're doing a fantastic job as far as getting people who are qualified for different positions into work. So that'd be another avenue to look.
And there are state associations, the engineers group is one that comes to mind just for an example. And most of those associations have bulletin boards for state and county jobs that are available around the state.
Would the board consider including relocation expenses as part of the overall compensation package?
For a quality individual, I'd want some sort of a commitment for longevity here. We've done that with other positions.
Commissioner Mullen?
I would agree with that. If they're a quality candidate, yes.
Yeah, I'd concur, but I wouldn't want to bring somebody in from the Middle East or somewhere afar where the cost would be extreme. I think we'd want to keep it sort of in,
We could control that.
yeah. All right. Anything else?
That's all I had this morning. Thank you.
All right, so we're to our second public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
No one on the phone.
Anybody in the room? All right, well, I thank everybody for the meeting today, and at this point in time, if there's no business for the good of the county, this meeting is adjourned. Oh,
We have the risk pool insurance we need to discuss, sorry.
Yes, thank you.
so we got risk pool.
Yeah. Jen, you may want to come to the microphone to explain, but the risk pool,
Keith, if you'll
Insurance.
excuse me just a
Yeah.
second, just so that we can clean up the record. There was other business, Chair wasn't aware of it. I'm not sure any of us were either, and we did adjourn, but as long as the board concurs that we can take on additional business, nobody has any objection, right?
No objection.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to have that in there in case anybody took challenge to the fact that we had maybe adjourned. Thanks.
okay, thank you, yeah. The cost of our risk pool insurance have grown exponentially, and we are in a place now of having to make a decision regarding additional insurance for next year. Jen, I don't know if I have those numbers right in front of me, but it was like a 25% increase in premiums,
26?
26%.
It's
Yeah,
something like that.
substantial.
Yes, I don't have the exact
For a
numbers.
second level of liability insurance.
Well,
what is-
overall, all of our insurance has gone up. We have the typical insurance that goes from 0 to. We have the typical insurance that goes from 0 to 10 million, and then we have another policy that goes from 10 million to 20 million. Like I said, everything's going up. Those are the standard insurances that I would recommend. Traditionally, we have also gotten an additional insurance policy that is for an additional 5 million above the 20 million. So if we ever reached a claim that was 24 million, that extra third insurance policy would cover it. However, that policy is like all the rest, going up again this year, and I can't recall the dollar amount, but I think it's another.
It's
10,000?
it's about 10,600 per employee year essentially, and I think if I read the scale correctly, it'd be roughly 1.5 times the 10,600. So if I'm doing the calcs right, it's somewhere 16, 17,000, somewhere in there to buy the additional 5 million on top of the 20 million. Historically, the board has purchased that because it was quite inexpensive, but it's gone up the last few years, and this year 26% alone just this year. So that's really the question is it worth 16,000 for 5 million to go on top of 20 million we already have? And the question I would have for you is, what's the largest claim you can recall the county having settled since you've been here?
Since I've been here, we've only settled one, what was a bi-county one, but I think we ended up paying, or our portion of it was 1.5 million.
And we have 20 million
And we
coverage.
have 20 million coverage, and I think as I explained to Keith, and I hate to jinx us by saying this, but the only event that I could foresee where we would exceed 20 million would be like a catastrophic event here at the county building or in the county jail. Because this is not overall coverage, this is a coverage per incident. So each incident would qualify up to 20 million. So unless we had some sort of absolute catastrophe with all of our employees involved either here or at the jail, we're not going to reach 20 million typically.
The one consideration that concerned me just a little bit was the fact that if we choose not to acquire this excess capacity, then the cost of that stays the same for the risk pool. And so the remaining participants in the risk pool have to cover our share of that cost. Even though we don't get any protection for it in that circumstance, they would still be required to pay it. So their costs are going to go up a little bit as a result of Franklin County. So just in terms of the idea of partnership and, kumbaya was a group, that's kind of a factor to consider. But
So Jen, a couple questions.
Yeah.
Policy 1, 0 to 10 million, what's that costing us?
I don't know those numbers.
And you don't know the numbers between the 10 and 20 million, policy 2?
No, this is
Yeah,
not something I'm typically involved in.
Who are the other members in our pool?
The majority of the counties in Washington State.
But it's other counties, nothing more than other counties.
Just other counties,
Just
correct.
other
It's
counties, okay.
the Washington counties risk pool as opposed to the cities. They have their own pool. So the counties collectively go in, I think all the counties are involved in the up to 20 million, and then I think there's only 16 of the group that was buying that additional coverage. So Mr. Johnson's right, if we pull out, that coverage still costs the exact same, it's just now gonna be divided by 15 counties or however many counties are left. So their price will go up a little bit to adjust for us jumping out of it.
Unless they all opt out.
Unless they all opt out, correct.
So
And they
there's,
might, the more of us that jump out of it, the more expensive it gets for the remaining people, so they might
For policy
also.
1 and policy 2, they'll go up then?
No.
This
We're
is
just
only for the
talking about
extra.
Just that extra
Okay,
over 20
okay.
million.
yeah, there are 39 counties, 25 are members of the risk pool, 14 are not. And, yeah, it's predicated on worker hours, the premium is. And I don't recall how many of the 25 members, well, actually, I wouldn't have any way to know. I haven't even heard how many of the 25 are looking to take it. My sense is that the 26% premium increase is going to cause a number of them to say no thanks.
The total amount that are in the risk pool overall are not the total amount that are in that third policy.
Right.
It's only about, I think, 15 or 16, don't quote me on the exact numbers, but
Right.
not everybody that's in our pool
Right.
has opted for that
Yeah,
insurance.
so let's say there were only 10 of the 25 members excuse me. And with 10 of them, if it's, 15, 20,000, then us stepping out might affect them 10%. So it's not like it makes it undoable. There are some counties that clearly have different risk profiles than we do.
Correct.
Our recommendation, or my recommendation at least, and I think Jen concurs, is that we not participate in that added level. We don't think we need it and aren't exposed, and so.
I just feel like we're paying such an increase in the regular coverage that we do need, that this is just an additional hit that I don't think is absolutely necessary. There is the con of affecting the other people in the pool, but we're taking such a huge hit paying for the crime insurance that's gone up, that's separate from the 20 million liability. I mean, that's gone up. That's fairly cheap anyways, so it hasn't gone up astronomically in price, but percentage-wise, it has gone up considerably. But just the additional we're paying out in our other coverage, this may only be 16,000, but it's 16,000 that can be used, to offset the other huge increase we're paying.
So all of the counties that are in the risk pool, only about half of them are even taking the extra insurance.
Correct.
Thank you.
And the biggest claim you recall in the time you've been here is, same with me, about 1.5 million.
Yes.
And we have 20 million coverage.
Yeah, I think typically our claims, our largest claims are anywhere between 500 to 1.5 million are large claims. But the majority of the claims we have are under our threshold for coverage in the first place, as most of them are really small little claims that we deal with.
Okay, so the consensus of the board is?
I would opt out.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so next time I won't be so quick with the gavel, but please hurry.
That
please.
was my effort. Jen warned me the other day. I
Sorry,
didn't write it down.
we talked about it, but I know everyone's got a lot of stuff going on.
Yes, well, thank you, Jen. Okay, so with that, is there any other business for the good of the county? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.